Hello everyone, my name is Katie Wilson. I am an elementary education major here at the University of Utah. I completed my field experience hours in a 6th grade classroom with 23 students, 5 of which were native English speakers and the remaining 18 were English language learners. The classroom was a typical classroom, single desks, forward facing. All of the students got along with each other. There were never really any circumstances where any of the students had difficulties in portraying what they wanted to or needed to say. They were all well-behaved students, and it was just the typical classroom dynamic. As far as the levels, the WEDL levels of each student, most of them were at a pretty high level because they were in the 6th grade. There were a few students though that I knew were at lower levels. There were probably 3 or 4 of those students. And as far as their family and parent situations are, I do not know. That information was not disclosed to me. So to begin my examples of them using English, I'm going to start with my verbal examples that I heard. The first one, the teacher was talking, they were watching a video about the Greek gods, and the teacher had referred to Zeus as she. And a boy shouted out, "He is boy." This mistake was a simple mistake. He lacked the determiner a, which is a noun modifier. So in order to fix that mistake, all he needed to do was say, "He is a boy." Simple mistake. The second example of verbal language was a student was asked to define what a diameter was, and he said the diameter. So he said the diameter is, I think this little mistake was just his accent coming out. However, I could see, reading the word, I could see that he may have been confused that it was the long I sound instead of D or I, because it didn't have the typical setup that they would with the long I sound, and I knew that had been something they were discussing in their language arts portion of the class. For my written examples, I am going to do 3 separate ones. I did not have a paragraph that I had reviewed for the students, so I'm just going to do 3 different examples from worksheets that I corrected and assisted the students with. The first one was a group project. It was a board game. The students had made a trivia game, and so they had made cards with trivia questions on them about the Greek gods. One of the cards said, "Jupiter is the goddess over what area of?" That's a simple fix. All they need to do is omit the word "of" at the end, and it makes complete sense. I did have a discussion with the students about this mistake, and just explained to them that they didn't need the preposition "of" at the end of the sentence. I think what they were trying to say was, what they had meant to say with the adding the "of" was Jupiter is the goddess of over what area, which still isn't correct, but I think that's what they were trying to say. But we discussed it and they decided to just omit the "of." And I told them that if they wanted to use preposition "of," that they could have switched it out for "over," and that would have worked as well. The second example of written language was a response to a questionnaire about Pompeii. They'd read an informational article about Pompeii, and the student said, "But their skeletons and but their coins." He meant to say, "But there were skeletons and there were coins." There were a few things he could have done with this to make it differently, but the biggest thing that I wanted to point out to this student was that the way it was written, it sounded like he was there, and that he lacked the word verb, the verb were, instead, and because of that, it made it sound like he was present in that time. So simple fix, I just said, you know, you can just say, but there were skeletons and coins, or you could say, but there were skeletons and there were coins. I left that up to him and walked away, helped another student, and came back and helped that student. And he had decided to just say, but there were skeletons and there were coins. So that was an example. I made sure that his voice was still apparent in that sentence. So the last written example I saw was on a worksheet. They were asked to use the word inspire in a sentence, and the students spelled inspire like this, inspire. And I transcribed it here in the IPA. Obviously this is the correct way of spelling inspire, and I transcribed it in the IPA. This mistake, they had just been talking about the I and the E, and so I think this student had struggled with that, and the teacher had mentioned that to me, that she had been struggling with that, and it's a concept I still struggle with today. It's hard to remember I before E except after C. It's just one of those things that they're similar, and it's such a tricky little thing that a lot of students, I would imagine, get confused with that. So it was an easy fix. I was grading her homework, so I wasn't able to discuss that with her, but I did tell her teacher about it. But all it was that I think she thought she needed this extra E here because to make that the long I sound, but actually she made an eh sound with the E before the I, because in the word inspire it has that sneaky E at the end. So it's the vowel consonant E, and that makes the long I sound. So that was definitely a mistake that I'm sure the teacher addressed with that student. After this field experience, I definitely became more aware of how important language instruction is, and that it is, a tool that these students need. And as educators, it is our job to give them those tools and knowledge that they need to know in order to be successful in their day-to-day lives. And I have not taught English yet. I've helped here and there and taught a few lessons, but I have never had a full year of me teaching English. So I think this experience really just kind of helped me get my feet wet and show me some of the issues that I may face in the classroom, and make me more aware of that. Like, I want to teach younger grades, so it's really important that I take it seriously, because the mistakes that they make when they're in the younger grades and the things they don't learn will affect them all the way up to, these kids are in 6th grade and about to go into middle school, junior high. So it's important that we take it seriously. Um, you know, it's I just had never known it was such an important thing, and I'm glad that I had the experience to work with these 6th graders, and I have learned a lot from them. And thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Bye.